Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We have a couple of announcements to give y'all before we start. I was listening to Mr. Watt's sermonette, and not only did Kodak drop the ball with the digital camera, but I used to work for Xerox Corporation. I was a service engineer for them for about 15 or 16 years before I went back to school. And Chester Carlson developed the xerographic process, which is used in all Xerox machines, all printers, et cetera, He took this idea in about 1940 to Kodak, and Kodak said, why would anybody want more than one copy of something? And so they dropped the ball on that idea also. So Kodak doesn't have a very good record with innovations. But anyway, let me read you.
Look how well known they are today.
Oh yeah. Let me read you some announcements about the upcoming holy days. Passover will be held here Thursday evening on April I think that's the 13th. April the 13th, or no, April the 14th. April the 14th. So that's Thursday, April the 14th. Time right after sundown. I think sundown by then. I think this is the week we change over from Central Daylight to regular time or whatever. So I think time will probably be about 8 o'clock, but I'll give you more announcements. So just make a mental note. Passover will be here in this room, April the 14th on Thursday evening, probably about 8 o'clock. Night to be much observed will be Friday evening. And then on the first day of unleavened bread, that's going to be Saturday, April the 16th. First day of unleavened bread will be here on the Sabbath. It'll be a double Sabbath, what the Jews call a strong Sabbath. That'll be April the 16th, a regular time from 10 to 12. And then please note the following announcement. Last day of unleavened bread will be April the 22nd, which will be a Friday. You will be combining with the Corpus Christi Church on that day. April the 22nd, Friday, services will be at 1 p.m. And what we're going to do in lieu of a cover day social is we're going to have a social at my home after services. So all of you who go to services on April the 22nd are invited to my home for a barbecue and a meal and all of that. And my wife may get with some of you about what to bring. But that'll be April the 22nd on a Friday. Now, please listen to the following, because I don't want later on people going, I didn't know that. Okay? I always tell my classes at school, let me have your eyeballs. You may be looking at me. Okay. On April the 23rd, which is the Sabbath, Saturday after the last day of unleavened bread. Last day of unleavened bread is April the 22nd. So we have a Friday being followed by a weekly Sabbath, which is April the 23rd. We're going to have Zoom services that morning for Harlingen. Now, any of you that want to stay overnight on April the 22nd, on Friday, you come to my house, enjoy the activity, stay overnight. We will pay for your hotel room for that night. Now, if there's 2 or 3 ladies that go, we ask that you share a room. I may also ask some of the members in Corpus Christi if they want to host some of you. But the point is this, on April the 22nd, Friday, services at 1 p.m. with Corpus Christi. We're going to have a social at my house afterwards. Hopefully all of you can attend. And those of you that want to stay Friday night can stay in a hotel or we'll get you housing. Okay? If you want to come back, that's entirely, it's a free country. You can come back and we're going to have Zoom services on Saturday morning. Because I figure a lot of you will probably be staying there Friday and we're not going to have, we're not going to have people here to give songs and sermons and all that. So I'm going to have a Zoom service on Saturday. So let me repeat that again. Friday, April the 22nd, the last day of unleavened bread, you're going to be meeting in Corpus Christi. There are no services here. Last day of unleavened bread. That Friday afternoon, after services, there's going to be a social at my house. Corpus Christi Church is going. All of you that attend here are going, etc., etc. Probably have some barbecue, the trimmings and all of that. Those of you that want to stay until the following Sabbath, we will pay for your hotel room or get you housing somewhere. What would be nice, and I'm just giving you an idea, is you can go to church on Friday, stay there, and then go to services on the Sabbath with Corpus Christi again, if you wanted to. Or you could just go to Zoom services, or however you want to do that. So just remember that Friday, April the 22nd, and Saturday, April the 23rd, will give you a special day as far as us being able to socialize and fellowship. So just bear that in mind. Any questions about that, or is anybody confused about what's going on? Very good. I'll have more announcements going on as we go along with all this. I do want to read you an announcement about the Pastoral Development Program. Some of you may have heard about it, some of you may not have. But let me just read you what the church has sent out to all of the ministry. It says, the Church of God, a worldwide association, is excited to announce the Pastoral Development Program, an in-person development and training opportunity for all of its U.S. field ministry beginning February 2021, or 22, excuse me. The Pastoral Development Program will consist of 3 sessions. Each will be attended by 18 or 19 couples who will travel to the church office in McKinney for 4 full days of classes, training, and fellowship. The sessions are scheduled for the month of February. They already had one. March, which is the one my wife and I are going to, and June 2022. Each class will consist of approximately 18 couples, 32 to 36 total attendance, and will comprise of a mix of some of our newer pastors along with more experienced pastoral couples. History. From its inception, CAGWA has focused much of its resources on the education, development, and training of both current pastors as well as new, younger leaders who are being called to the ministry of Jesus Christ. For example, Mr. Watts just finished a focused mentoring program. Not that he's being called to be a full-time minister, but I went through that program, and so many others. These efforts have included the focused mentoring program I just mentioned, the pastoral training program, as well as the pastoral continuing education classes that we have hosted online over the past 6 years. So every 3 or 4 months, I attend a day of online pastoral classes. However, with the exception of the Focused Mentoring Weekend and the biannual ministerial conference, virtually all of the above training has been online or web-based. With the Pastoral Development Program, couples will travel to Texas on a Wednesday, staying at the McKinney Sheraton for 5 nights. We're planning for full days of classes on Thursday and Friday, with a special group dinner the evening of the first day Thursday. Friday night and Sabbath will offer some free time for couples to spend time with each other, as well as to attend services in the local Dallas congregation. The Sabbath will be followed by a full day on Sunday, beginning with a brunch buffet for the wives and husbands, after which each group will engage in discussion, sharing thoughts on their respective roles, and serving and caring for God's people. The remaining class on Sunday will be topped off with another special group dinner the evening with entertainment and fellowship. Couples will then depart on Monday morning. The rationale: while the use of online technology, video classes, and live webcasts remains the core of our educational efforts with the ministry and leadership development, we believe that having in-person classes for our U.S. field ministry in 2022 is justified and will be helpful, encouraging, and edifying for our U.S. ministry. And it talks about education, it talks about relationships, it talks about encouragement, it talks about fellowship, and all of that sort of thing. So I just want to let you know that my wife and I will be going to the March session. That'll be March the 23rd on a Wednesday, and we'll return on Monday, March 28th. So please keep us and the program in your prayers. I think they just posted yesterday or the day before for this week one of the In Accord messages, and it talks about the Pastoral Development Program. So I just thought I'd let you know what was going on and what's coming down the pike for the wife and myself, and if you would keep us and all of the ministry in your prayers as we go to these classes. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the sermon for today. On February the 24th, which was just a few days ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin launched what he called special military operations in eastern Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine are now locked in a war that has forever changed the political landscape in Europe. As I'm speaking right now, as I am speaking to you today, the capital of the Ukraine, Kyiv, is preparing for the advance of the Russian army. Sometime today or possibly tomorrow or within the next day, the Russian army plans to enter the capital of the Ukraine and take over the management of the country. Now the Bible has predicted that there will be wars and rumors of wars. This will be one of the signs of the time of the end. And these events will usher in the return of Jesus Christ, as we all know. Now, one of the pivotal prophetic events that is certain to occur is centered in Europe. The Church of God has preached about these events for decades. I remember being a teenager, not in the church yet. I came into the church when I was 19 or 20, very young. But I remember at 13 years old reading the church literature, because I learned about the church when I was about 12 or 13 years old. My father went to a barber shop, found a Plain Truth, and he ordered me a magazine, a subscription, and he ordered my brother one. And he got home and he said, my father's a good Catholic. He said, you're going to start reading this magazine. Very, very good magazine. Well, I remember reading that magazine from then on and reading the church literature. And one of the things that the church stressed back, that was 55 years ago, was that Europe was going to unite, that there was going to be a coming United States of Europe. That was one of their prophetic cornerstones. And the church has actually been teaching this since the 1930s, which is probably about 85 years ago. You think 1930s, 85 years? It's almost going to be in another 10 years, it'll be 100 years that the church has been teaching this doctrine. So the church has been teaching for a long, long time that the unification of Europe is coming and it will be an emerging world power. Let me ask you a question. What will cause Europe to form into a new superpower? In this sermon today, we're going to look at the current events in Europe and Russia in light of what the Bible describes as a union of Europe into what many call the United States of Europe. This is a common term among prophetic predictors that there is coming a United States of Europe that is going to be composed of 10 nations. So we're going to look at what the Bible describes as this coming United States of Europe. We're going to look at what the Bible prophecy says about this union and what the future holds once this superpower appears on the scene. So once again, this has been going on in the church for many, many, many years. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look, point number one, at the present situation in Europe. Now we're going to look at the present situation in Europe. Unfortunately, this requires me to read a couple of long articles to give you a background of what's going on in Europe right now. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to read some articles. I'll give you the title and how to reference them. This is the Russian-Ukrainian relations in the Wikipedia encyclopedia, online encyclopedia. All right, so I'm going to read you about the relations between Russia and Ukraine. What led up to this war that's going on now? Relations between the two countries have been notably hostile since the 2014 Revolution of Dignity, which toppled Ukraine's elected president and his supporters in response to his refusal to sign a political association and free trade agreement with the EU that enjoyed majority support in the Ukrainian parliament. That's a big sentence. Let me tell you what it means in plain English. The president that they had before in the Ukraine was being pressured to join the European Union. Everybody in the parliament, the majority wanted to join the European Union. He did not want to do that. He still had ties to Russia. He was an old Russian and had Russian views. He did not want to associate with the European Union. So they ousted him. And they put in the present president, the one that you're watching on videos about my country's being invaded. That's the one that replaced him. Ukraine's post-revolutionary government wished to commit the country to a future within both the EU, Economic Union, European Union, and Nato. NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The thing about NATO is that NATO is made up of about 24 countries in Europe. And the NATO treaty says that if you invade one country, the rest of us will come to your aid. Sort of like the old Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one. That's why the Ukraine is in the process of, before it was invaded, of trying to become a member of NATO. It is not a member of NATO now. That's why NATO is not doing anything, because the Ukrainian country is not part of NATO right now. So therefore, NATO does not politically feel responsible for coming to the aid of the Ukrainian people. That's where we're at right now. Let's see. In 2019, amendments were made to the Constitution of the Ukrainian government, which enshrined the irreversibility of the country's strategic course towards European Union and NATO membership. So in other words, Parliament said, we want to join NATO, and we want to join the European Union in 2019, and we're going to go there. Now, you remember in your history, back in about 2080, you had Gorbachev, President Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev tear down the wall. The Berlin Wall came down. The countries that were aligned with the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republics, which in English is the United States of Russia, some of those states succeeded and became democratic. One of them was Ukraine. So that's about 35, 40 years ago. We have a whole generation of Ukrainians that have been raised in a democratic country. Now Russia wants that country back. That's what's led to the invasion we have now. All right, and I'm going to keep reading out here. Throughout 2021 and 2022, a Russian military buildup on the border of Ukraine escalated tensions between the two countries and strained their bilateral relations, with the United States sending a strong message that an invasion would be met with dire consequences for a Russian economy. This is before the presidential administration. You remember who was in power then? All right. Now, let me read you about the international sanctions during the Russo-Ukrainian War. This is right out of the Wikipedia Encyclopedia. They have different areas here. This is the European Union sanctions. What has the European Union done since Russia has invaded the Ukraine? They have sanctions against them. I'm going to read you some of them. And this is a lot of background information, but it gets you to know what is going on. On the morning of February the 24th, what are we at? March the 10th? That's 3 weeks ago. On the morning of 24th of February, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, announced massive EU sanctions to be adopted by the Union. And it targeted all kinds of banks, all kinds of technological companies, all kinds of things that the Russians were trading with. So they've sanctioned, the European Union has made sanctions against Russia to pressure them to not invade the country. You know how sanctions work. They don't work very well all the time. Now let me read you out of the article NATO. This is in the Wikipedia. You remember that the Ukrainian government wanted to ally themselves with the European Union. You know what a European Union is? It's a union of a bunch of European countries. What does that sound like prophetically? They wanted to align with the European Union, and they wanted to join NATO. Now, in order to join NATO, it's about a 2 or 3 year process. There are about 26 countries now that are part of NATO, including the United States, Canada, and Great Britain, and many other countries in Europe. Ukraine wanted to join NATO. Once again, if the Ukrainian government had been part of NATO right now, it's a big word, if Ukraine had been part of the NATO community, if Russia would have invaded the Ukraine, the other NATO nations were obligated by treaty to go to the defense of the Ukraine. Now, the Russian president knows this. So while the application is being processed, he decided to invade the country before it became allied with NATO. That way we wouldn't have to worry about NATO interfering with the invasion, which NATO has said they're not going to do militarily right now. So let me read you what the Wikipedia Encyclopedia says about NATO. You hear about NATO and you wonder what it is. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is an intergovernmental military alliance between 28 European countries and 2 North American countries. The 2 North American countries are Canada and the United States. Established in the aftermath of World War II The organization implements the North Atlantic Treaty, signed April the 4th, 1949. So right after World War II, all these nations signed this alliance. What was on the minds of the people when they signed this alliance in 1949? What had happened to Poland when Germany invaded Poland? When Germany invaded Poland, it's almost a mirror image of what's happening now with Russia invading the Ukraine. There was a strong man, and nobody stood up to it. So they developed this North Atlantic Treaty to keep that from happening in the future. Let me keep reading to you again. NATO constitutes a system of collective security whereby its independent member states agree to mutual defense in response to an attack by an external party. The NATO headquarters are located in Brussels, Belgium, with the headquarters of the Allied Command Operations in Belgium. Since its founding, the admission of new member states has increased the alliance from the original 12 countries to 30. So now there's about 30 countries that are in NATO. NATO currently recognizes Bosnia, Herzegovina, Georgia, and Ukraine as aspiring members. So these 4 countries that were all part of Russia once are now trying to join NATO. And it's a 2-year process, so they haven't done it yet. Enlargement has led to tension with non-member Russia, with Russian President Vladimir Putin demanding that NATO provide legal guarantees that it would stop expanding east. After NATO rejected this condition, Russia invaded the Ukraine in February of 2022 in an attempt to prevent it from aligning with NATO. So here we have the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We have Ukraine in the process of trying to join it. If Ukraine was part of NATO, then the other nations of NATO would have been obligated to come to the aid of the Ukraine. Now also, the Ukrainian country borders the Black Sea. And when you get to the Black Sea, you have a warm water port to go out into the Mediterranean and all of that, and you can it'll increase your shipping. If Ukraine becomes anti-Russian, Russia's not going to be able to have that access to that warm water port. Now they have it through other places, but it's a large area that would be affected. Russia continues to politically oppose further expansion, this is of NATO, seeing it as inconsistent with informal understandings between Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev and European and U.S. negotiators that allowed for a peaceful German reunification. You got Germany thrown in the mix. The Bible predicts that there's going to be a European superpower that's going to rise somehow, and that it's going to be led by Germany, Assyria. Now, if I had told you 2,000 years ago that the nation Brazil was going to be in the center of prophetic events, you would have said, well, let's see what happens. The Bible has said the same thing. It's not talking about Brazil. It's talking about Europe. Nobody would have believed that Germany would rise after World War II. And here we have Germany as a central member of NATO and also of the European Union. Just exactly what the Bible predicted is coming to pass, brother. NATO's expansion efforts are often seen by Moscow leaders as a continuation of a Cold War attempt to surround and isolate Russia. So from Russia's point of view, NATO is not a good thing because it's isolating Russia. And it's turning all these countries that were once part of the USSR into nations that are hostile to the Russian ideology. And so you've got the European Union and you've got NATO mixed up in this. Now let me read you, I know that CNN is very liberal. That's not a biblical statement, that's a political statement. CNN is very liberal, but let me read you some reports that were published in the CNN website. This is 4 ways the world has changed since Russia invaded Ukraine. So this was published March the 3rd. We're at March the 12th today. So about a week ago, this was published. They give 4 things that have changed since Russia invaded Ukraine. Number 3 is 1 million people on the move, which talks about the refugees. And then number 4 is food and fuel, which talks about how fuel is going to be more expensive for the Europeans. Russia exports a lot of their oil to Europe, and a lot of their food, wheat, is sent to Europe and to Africa and Asia. So there's problems with food and refugees. That's not the important concepts that we're going to look at out of these four. The first one we're going to look at is, number one, a shifting world order. Now, you have to ask yourself, before we get into the Bible, you got to ask yourself, what is going to cause Europe to unite? What is going to cause Germany to lead Europe when it unites? What is going to cause the European Union, whatever it's going to be in the prophetic events that happen, what's going to cause it to align with a great false church? Because we have a union of religion and politics, right? So what's going to cause this to happen? And what's going to cause there to be war in the future? Let me read you the number one, a shifting world order. The invasion, and this was written a week ago. This is current news right now. The invasion of Ukraine didn't usher in a new era of big power politics. It was a violent exclamation point confirming one of the most significant changes in the geopolitical world order since 9/11. Do you know what geopolitical means? The politics of the world. Let me read you what it says here. In the ensuing years, global terrorism consumed much of Western leaders' attention. ISIS and Al-Qaeda were the enemies that needed countering. The Kremlin was no longer viewed as the same threat it once was. So much so that in 2012, President Barack Obama mocked then presidential candidate Mitt Romney as out of touch for calling Russia the number one geopolitical foe of the United States. So we were looking for terrorism, not so much for Russia. Continuing with the article, by that time, Putin had already shown he was keen to upend the post-Cold War order. What was a post-Cold War order? Post means after. What happened after the Cold War? The Russian USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic, some of the states broke away. He didn't like that. Putin wants things the way they work. Continue to read. The former KGB intelligence officer took office in 2000, vowing to restore Russia's former glory, sometimes through military force. As prime minister in 1999, he launched an offensive in the Russian Republic of Chechnya against separatist guerrillas. In 2008, the Kremlin invaded Georgia and recognized two breakaway republics in the country, which were at that time were going closer to Europe. Later, and then you remember about the war in Syria, how President Putin supported the war in Syria and all of that went on. All right, let me read you some more stuff here. Last week's invasion may have ended that. After a quarter century of the Western world dealing with Putin, he may have finally pushed the envelope and become a pariah. In response, the Western world has hit Russia with unprecedented sanctions that have crippled its financial institutions, sending its economy and the ruble into a tailspin, and even targeted Putin and some of his inner circle personally. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been, the United States President Joe Biden said on Tuesday in the State of the Union address. So there was things that happened, and it changed the landscape of Europe forever. Europe's not going to go back to the way it was after this. Whether Russia's thrown out of the country or whether Russia invades Ukraine and continues and takes over the country, or whatever happens, the European state is not going to be the same. The European countries are not going to look at Russia the same way anymore. This is a second point in the article. And this is very interesting. I saw this and I went, whoa. Point number two, the four things that have changed. Point number two, a more unified Europe. A more unified Europe. I'm quoting here. Russia's invasion has also prompted the European Union to make security decisions that would have been unthinkable a few weeks ago. President Trump lambasted the European Union members because they were not putting enough into defense. You know, he said you have to put 2% or more of your gross national product into defense. But they all said, oh no, we're not going to do that. There's no threats with anything. The United States is going to take care of us. You've got troops stationed all over Europe. We don't have to worry about anything. What has happened to those troops? They've been pulled out. They're not in Europe anymore. What do you think? What do you think the European Union is now thinking about whether they need to beef up their military forces or not? What would you do if you were a European country? Let me keep reading. Though the bloc has for years been one of the world's most powerful economic players, talking about the EU, it has failed to turn that strength into equivalent geopolitical might. The EU has historically been divided over exactly how much central control Brussels should have over foreign policy. This has stood in the way of the EU's lofty global ambitions. So they didn't want Russia having too much power. Listen to this statement. Europe's thinking on defense, security, and foreign affairs has evolved light years in the matter of a few days. It is now waking up from a decades-long dream that the stability provided by an interconnected world would prevent war breaking out, and that if this should happen, America would sort it out. Final statement here is this. The crisis in Ukraine has shattered the illusions that security and stability in Europe comes for free, one senior diplomat told CNN this week. When there was no real threat, politics seemed remote. Now there is a war on our border. Now we know that if we have to pay up and act together. So what has happened? The European Union is going to become stronger because of what has happened in Russia and Ukraine. I'm not going to read you more because it's warm in here and all of that. But I've read articles where they asked some of the Russian people in the know, people that are Russian analysts, and they asked them, would Putin use nuclear warfare? And the answer from all of them was yes. Yes. Now, what do you think would happen if the United States sent troops into the Ukraine? What would happen? It's a very, very touchy situation, brother. So what I want you to see is that there are things going on in Europe now that can bring about some of the things that we have been prophesizing about for at least almost 100 years. Members of NATO include the following: Albania, this is NATO, Albania, Belgium, alphabetical order, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Turkey, as well as the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada. Those are the members of NATO. Here are the members of the European Union. Almost exact same reading. Members of the European Union that are also members of NATO include the following: Belgium. In other words, Belgium is a member of NATO and also a member of the European Union. Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain. So they're all intertwined together. Let me make some predictions from a political point of view. Russia and the things that are going on in Russia will cause Germany, Europe, and NATO to become stronger. They've got to be. That's what everybody's saying. Another thing that's going to happen is Europe is going to unite. Europe is going to have to unite. And then another one, which is another biblical prophetic concept that we can cover later on. The United States, Great Britain, and the Israelitish nations will be removed and be out of the picture. Read what it says in Ezekiel. So what we have is we have things that are setting up the culmination of the prophetic events that we have been preaching about for hundreds of years. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen next week. I'm not saying it's going to happen next month. I'm not saying it's going to happen in 5 or 10 years. It might. Well, I don't know. We don't know. But we're moving closer to that. We're not moving farther away from that. So when we read the Bible and it talks about this coming European Union, I mean, it's fitting in with what is going on in the world. To give you an example, the Bible talks about Jerusalem and the possibility that Jerusalem would be surrounded by armies. at the time of the end, and the possibility that Jerusalem will be a hot potato. Has that happened? Yes. I mean, just this little city that's being prophesied about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and everything the Bible prophesied about is coming to pass. And once again, for the last 100 years, the churches of God have been preaching that there's going to be a union of Europe. It's coming, brethren. You need to wake up. So the second point we're going to look at today, I'm going to get in the Bible on this, is prophecies concerning the United States of Europe. What does the Bible say about this coming union in Europe? Let's go ahead and look at Daniel chapter 2. And we have discussed all of this. You know, we had our prophecy series, and we talked about, Daniel, and we talked about the beast power. We talked about the resurrected Roman empires. We talked about the king of the north and the king of the south. This is all being tied together in the events that we're seeing going on now. You need to review those sermons. I have them posted online on the Congo website. If you haven't heard them or don't remember them, you need to go back to them and review them, because, and I don't want to be melodramatic, but we're seeing prophecy being fulfilled, if not soon, pretty soon. Okay? Let's go to Daniel chapter 2. We're going to look at what it says about this coming European Union. Now in Daniel chapter 2, I'm not going to go through the whole chapter, but we've already studied it. You had the vision of the great image. And we had Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he dreamed about this great image. And he called his advisors and said, tell me what I have dreamed and tell me what it means. And they said, well, if you tell us what you dreamed, we'll tell you what it means. They said, no, I want you to tell me what I dreamed. Because you can make up any story you want about my dream. And Daniel said, to make a long story short, not only can I tell you what you dreamed, but I'll tell you what it means. And I'm not doing it on my own power. I'm doing it with God's power. So we read here in Daniel chapter 2 about the golden head. And the golden head was Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians. Then we read about the Medes and the Persians, the silver chest and arms. The Medes and the Persians. One kingdom is stronger than the other. That's why you have a right hand and a left hand. Then we have the Greco-Macedonian or the Greek Empire, the midsection, the belly and the thigh, the belly and the area of the groin, the midsection. And then after that, we had the coming of the Roman Empire. You remember the Roman Empire, the iron legs? There was how many legs? 2, made of iron. How many divisions to the Roman Empire? 2. The Eastern Empire and the Western Empire. The Western Empire had a capital in Rome, and the Eastern Empire had a capital in Constantinople. Constantinople means the city of Constantine. Remember Constantine? Studied about him, how he was one of the emperors that changed worship from Saturday to Sunday, and from Passover to Easter. And his capital was Constantinople, later changed to Istanbul. We had 2 divisions of that, because we had 2 legs. Notice verse 35, or verse 33. Its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands. This stone came from heaven. Jesus Christ is the chief cornerstone, the stone that was rejected by the builders. This stone later becomes a great mountain. What is a mountain? A kingdom. A stone is a little piece of a mountain. So this little stone comes out of heaven, and it later becomes a great mountain. Kingdom. What did this stone do? Verse 34, you watched while the stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its head, on its arms. How about in the middle? No, its legs. No, it did not. It said it struck its image on its feet of iron and clay. That part of the prophecy has not occurred yet, because the feet have not come to pass yet. Because the feet has 10 toes. And the 10 toes, how many toes do you have coming out of your right foot? 5. How many toes do you have coming out of your left foot? 5. What's 5 and 5? 10. 5 are coming from the Western Empire. 5 are coming from the Eastern Empire. Is that my interpretation? No, but that's what the Bible says. The Bible is very specific. Verse 34, and broke them in pieces. So if the image is still standing, That means in the future there's going to come the toes. We're already past the Roman Empire. The toes haven't arrived. If you were to say chronologically, where are we on this image? You would say we're about the ankles. Because the two empires of the Roman Empire, East and West, have come and gone. The 10 toes haven't come yet, so we're about at the ankles. We're waiting for the 10 toes to form up. What does this stone do? It hits the feet. It hits the toes. It does not hit the ankle. It does not hit the legs. It does not hit the stomach. The image is still standing. You don't think we're in Babylon? Where does Christmas come from? Babylon. Where does Easter come from? Babylon. Where does Valentine's Day come from? Babylon. Isn't it amazing, brethren, that the Bible says that there's going to be a power that rules the world, and it is going to come out of Babylon, and it's going to exist till the time of Christ, and we're in a society that worships Babylonian holidays? Why not Japanese holidays? Why not holidays from the Aztecs? Because that doesn't fit Bible prophecy. So we are in Babylon now. This image is still alive and well. It hasn't been torn down yet. Notice verse 41. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. So we got these toes and they're partly of baked clay and partly of iron. So imagine like these feet and toes, and they're half iron and half clay. They don't mix together. They don't mix together. Verse 41, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron. The kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with the ceramic clay. So imagine, think about all those countries that I read to you that are in the European Union and NATO. They all have different cultures. They all have different languages. They all have different customs. They're partly strong, partly weak. I mean, brethren, come on. It's talking about that right here. Notice verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And as you saw the iron mixed with the ceramic clay, then they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, which kings? The 10 toes. Not the days of the kings of Babylon, not the days of the kings of the Medo-Persians, not the Greek kings or the Roman kings, but in the days of the kings that are represented by the 10 toes. And let me tell you something. As you come down the image, this is at one time period. This is at one time period. This is at one time period. The legs are at one time period. The toes all come to power at the same time. You don't have one toe up here, and one toe here, and one toe here, because one of the toes existed before the others. The 10 toes all exist at the same time. The human body, and the analogy being made here is perfect. Verse 44, and in the days of those kings, the kings of the toes, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. So what's going to happen? There's going to come a union of nations, 10 of them, 5 from the Eastern Empire, 5 from the Western Empire, coming out with some kind of Roman connection. And they're going to be destroyed by the return of Jesus Christ when he comes. And after he destroys the toes, the image falls over, and Jesus Christ establishes a kingdom. We've been preaching about that for the last 100 years, the Church of God has. And really, the true church members, down since the time of the apostles, because we have the book of Revelation that was given to them in 90 AD, probably had some inklings about this. But we should have a better and a clearer picture, because we're living in the time when these things can happen or may happen. I'm not telling you that Mendes said the time of the end is next week. It's not what I'm telling you. Don't take it out of context. But I'm telling you something. And that is, we've been preaching about this for a long time, and the longer we go, the closer it comes to fruition. The closer it comes to fruition. We're getting closer, brethren. We're 100 years closer than we were 100 years ago. Now, I want you to notice what is common about all of these kingdoms. All these kingdoms are Gentile kingdoms. They're Gentile kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar was Gentile, Medes and Persia Gentile. They were non-Jewish. They were all Gentiles. Ezekiel 30, verse 3. Ezekiel 30, back a few pages. Ezekiel 30, verse 3. What's going to happen right before the day of the Lord? Now, we studied about the day of the Lord. We studied about the astronomical signs that were going to happen with the day of the Lord, remember? We studied about the day of the Lord going to occur right before Jesus Christ returns. All these prophetic things I'm giving you are tying together, brother. There's a purpose for the messages I've been giving you. Ezekiel chapter 30, verse 3. Ezekiel 30, verse 3. For the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near. It will be a day of clouds, the time of the Gentiles. Who's going to be empowered during the day of the Lord? The church? The Israelitish nations? No, it's the time of the Gentiles. All of these nations we were talking about in this image in Daniel chapter 2, they're all Gentiles. The 10 toes are going to be Gentiles. Let's go to Revelation 11. Right before Jesus Christ returns, the church goes into a place of protection. We've talked about that. You know, we should. This all should be just review. Revelation 11 talks about the two witnesses. What happens right before the two witnesses? Notice verse 2. But leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city, Jerusalem, underfoot for 42 months, or 3.5 years, or 1,260 days, or however you want to phrase it. So we got the Gentiles that are alive and well up until the time when Jesus Christ returns. Now, we've looked, and we're talking about this coming union in Europe. And in Daniel chapter 2, it mentions it as having 10 kings and being symbolized by the 10 toes of the image in Daniel chapter 2. And that Jesus Christ is going to return as the stone, and it's going to hit these 10 toes, destroy them, and then the stone becomes a great image. So after the destruction of the 10 toes, we have Christ's kingdom being established. Okay? That's the timeline in Daniel chapter 2. Let's see if we have another timeline that fits that, and we do. That's in Revelation chapter 17. Now, we're not going to review the whole chapter. That was one of the chapters in our prophetic series, Revelation 17. So if you want to know about details, go back to the message I gave previously. But we're looking at Revelation 17 from the prospect or from the concept of this unification of Europe. Revelation chapter 17. Notice there's a beast in verse 3. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. So the beast, let me give you some things to think about, review. The beast is the Roman Empire being led by the Catholic Church. The woman, the false woman, is the woman that rides the beast. She is the church that controlled the Roman Empire. So we have the Roman Empire being controlled by the woman, the church, false church. You can read more about her in Revelation 18, where it talks about the fall of Babylon. Mystery Babylon. She's a whore. And she has daughters that are whores. The great false church had a bunch of people come out of it and protest. You know what the word Protestant means? Protestants. They protested out of the Catholic Church. And they didn't protest enough because they're keeping the same doctrines the Catholic Church is keeping. So we had the great false church. We had the Protestants coming out of it. We have the great false whore and many daughters. Keeps the same days. Keeps the same ideas. Just changed a little bit, but not enough. So here in Revelation 17, we have this woman who's riding the Roman Empire. Some of the resurrections of the Roman Empire. There was some resurrections of the Roman Empire that were pre-Catholic, and they were not controlled by the great false church. And there was some of the revivals of the Roman Empire that were controlled by the Catholic Church. So we're reading here about the woman and her control of some of the resurrections of the Roman Empire. Once again, a lot of details. We already studied this. All of you should be going, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, I remember saying that. I remember studying that too. Because we studied about this for weeks. Now, we're going to look at Revelation 17. We have this woman in verse 3 riding the beast. What is her name? Verse 5, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. She was drunk with the blood of the saints. The great false church martyred hundreds of thousands of Christians, true Christians, and killed them for keeping the Sabbath, for keeping the Passover, for various other things that they did. Verse 6, she was drunk with the blood of the saints. Now I want you to notice something. Now in verse 3, there's this beast, and the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now what are the horns like as far as, do we have this? Do we have the 7 heads and we have these 10 horns? Are the horns scattered among the beast? How are they arrayed? Because that tells us when they're going to come to pass, or when they're going to come to power. Once again, big toe here, little toe here, middle toe over here. You got the 10 toes in their contemporary kings. They exist at the same time. The 10 toes in Daniel 2 are all destroyed by the coming Christ. So they all have to be alive at the same time, right? Because they're all killed by Christ. Christ's return. They're destroyed by his return. Notice here in Revelation 17, verse 3, 7 heads and 10 horns. Notice it's going to give some more details about the 10 horns. Let me give you a hint. The 10 horns here, are the same as the 10 toes in Revelation and in Daniel chapter 2. Notice verse 16. And the 10 horns, notice verse 12. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, that they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. A couple of things. They haven't come to power yet. When they come to power, they're only going to exist for a short time, an hour. Now, I want you to notice something. Verse 9. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, are 7 kingdoms, are 7 revivals. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, and the other has not yet come. 5 have fallen. What does that mean? Past. 1 is right now. When this prophecy was being written, there was the 6th head alive. 1 is, and the other one hasn't come yet. Notice what it says. There are 5 that have come and gone. They're fallen. There's 1 that exists right now, and there's 1 in the future. 5, 6, 7. There's your 7 heads. There's 1 head in the future. It says here in verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw at the time when the 6th head existed, the 10 horns had not come to power yet. At the time the 6th head existed, 5 have fallen. There's 1 that is right now, and there's 1 that's coming. At this point in time, the time of the 6th head, the 10 horns hadn't come to power yet. Because it says here, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet. So they're in the future sometime. So they're going to be alive with what head? The 7th one. So the 7-headed beast had 6 head, and the 7th head had 10 horns on it. Because that's what it's saying right here. Let me read it. It's very important that you get that. 5 have fallen. There's 1 that's alive right now as I'm giving you this prophecy. And there's another one that's coming later. And there's also 10 kings that are coming, the horns, and they haven't come yet. So that the 10 horns can't be part of the first 5 horns, first 5 heads, or the 6th head. They got to be part of the 7th head. And they're going to receive authority for 1 hour in verse 12 as kings with the beast. Verse 16. And the 10 horns which you saw in the beast, these will hate the harlot. So they're going to make war against the political system is going to make war against the religious system. Notice verse 13. This is talking about the 10 horns. These will be of 1 mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. What's the beast? The Roman Empire. They will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. What's going to happen? The 10 kings are going to make war with the Lamb. When does the Lamb return? When the stone comes up out of heaven. So the 10 kings here are another way of saying the 10 toes in Daniel chapter 2. So in Daniel chapter 2, we have the 10 toes that are going to be destroyed by the returning stone of Christ. In Revelation chapter 17, we have 5 kings are fallen, 1 is now. There's another head coming, and it's going to have 10 horns. Those 10 horns are going to have power for 1 hour, and they're going to make war with Christ. And Christ is going to destroy them. So the 10 horns in Revelation 17 are the same as the 10 toes in Daniel chapter 2. And what happens? When Christ returns, there's going to be all kinds of wars and warfare. You can read about these 10 toes. The 10 toes and the 10 horns are what we term the United States of Europe. They're going to be the European Union remade. Is it going to be called the European Union in 10 years, 5 years, 2 months? I don't know. I don't know. But it's going to be made up of 10 kings. Who does the Bible say is going to lead these 10 kings? The Assyrians. We're not going to go there, but look at your Old Testament prophecies. What is happening in Europe right now? Germany and the European Union are coming together and being more unified because of the events that are going on in Ukraine and the Russian invasion. What is the Russian invasion teaching us? The Russian invasion is teaching us that Rome is getting stronger. The Russian invasion is teaching us that Europe is never going to be the same again. The Russian invasion is teaching us that Germany has to unite Europe to fight against another Putin that may come in the future, or maybe this one. Is there going to be World War III? Depends on what happens now. You know, if nobody does anything and they leave Putin alone, he's going to take over Ukraine. And it's going to be business as usual for a couple of days, a couple of months, 10, 15 years. I mean, Putin's not going to live much longer. What I'm getting at is, can you see the handwriting on the wall? Oh yeah, you can see it there. You can see it coming. Now, at the time of the end, we have the 10 horns being the United States of Europe. The first thing that we looked at was about the present situation in Europe. I read you all those articles. The second thing we looked at was a prophecy concerning the formation of the United States of Europe. We did that in Daniel chapter 2 and Revelation chapter 17. Next point, number 3. What will occur in the time of the end that concerns the United States of Europe? What is the United States of Europe going to do once it forms? Listen to the question. Don't put more into the question than I said. When the United States of Europe forms, tomorrow, 10 years, 50 years, 4 months, when the United States of Europe forms, what is going to be the events that are going to occur? That's what we're going to look at. Now let me give you something else to think about, or something else to note. This has been talked about in our Bible studies we had before in prophecy. The United States of Europe is the king of the north, also known as the beast power. So when it talks about the beast power, it talks about the beast power, talks about the political and the religious. The political beast is the 10 nations, and maybe the king that controls them, and also known as the beast power. So when you read beast power, king of the north, 10 toes, 10 horns, it's all the same entity in different formats. What's going to happen? Daniel chapter 11. This is what's going to happen. Some of the things that are going to occur when the United States of Europe forms. Daniel chapter 11. Once again, we studied about these in our prophecy series. Daniel 11. Daniel 11. And we're going to look at verse 40. At the time of the end, what is the time? Time of the end. Notice Daniel 11, verse 40. This is at the time of the end. Notice verse 35. Until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. Notice Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. Shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Notice verse 9 of Daniel chapter 12. Time of the end. Let me ask you a question. When does this occur? Time of the end. It occurs 4 times. It tells you, hello, are you listening? This is occurring at the time of the end. Notice what occurs at the time of the end. Verse 40 of Daniel chapter 11. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. And the king of the north, who is the king of the north? The king of the north is the United States of Europe, the beast power. The king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships. Who is the king of the south? We're not sure. But indications are that the king of the south probably is going to be, what's going to be the great superpower coming on the scene after the European nations form? Not Russia, but the Muslims. The Muslims have always hated, quote-unquote, Christianity. So we have here the United States of Europe probably fighting some conglomeration of Islamic nations. At the time of the end, verse 40, the king of the south, this conglomeration of Islamic nations, shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships, and shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land. What is the glorious land? The Middle East. Who is he? The king of the north. The United States of Europe, the leader of the United States of Europe, is going to go into the Middle East, into the promised land with his armies. But he shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hands against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He's going to go as far south as Egypt. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, precious things of Egypt, Libyans and Ethiopians shall be at his heels. But when he invades the Middle East, and he goes as far as Egypt, and Ethiopia and Lydia, he's in that area, tidings out of the east are going to get his attention. Verse 44, but news from the east and the north, there's no word in the Hebrew for northeast. So it says east and north, that should be the northeast. What's northeast of Jerusalem? Northeast of Jerusalem is Siberia, Russia, Mongolia, Asiatic hordes, lots of people there. Shall trouble him thereby, therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas, the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea, at Jerusalem right there. And the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. What's going to happen at the time of the end? Got that stone cut out without hands. You've got the, in Revelation 17, the 10 horns fighting Christ and making war against him. He's going to overcome them. That's what's going to happen here in verse 45. He's going to meet the returning Christ. But where's he going to go before he meets the returning Christ? We've got the United States of Europe, which is 10 toes, which is the United States of Europe. There's going to be war in the Middle East. He's going to go to Jerusalem and plant his headquarters near there. And then what's going to happen? Let's go to Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Once again, we've studied all of these things out before, just to refresh yourself with the Bible series on prophecy. Matthew 24. Matthew 24, and in verse 3. Tell us what these things shall be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age. Time of the end. What's the context of this? Time of the end. Same thing we read in Daniel 11 and Daniel 12, the time of the end. What's going to happen at the time of the end? Verse 13, same chapter. But he who endures to the end shall be saved, and this gospel shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation that was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and we studied about the abomination of desolation, there's going to be an abomination of desolation set up in some location in Jerusalem that's going to desolate the temple. Now, does that mean the temple has to be built? No, some people say that a worship center will be built. And there's all kinds of ramifications that will entail. But there's coming a time when there's going to be something abominable set up that desolates the Jewish nation and its offerings. We read about that and studied about that in one of our past Bible studies. So we've got the abomination of desolation coming to pass. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. And Daniel chapter 12. We studied in Daniel chapter 12 and Daniel chapter 11, about verse 40, about, the time of the end and the king of the north and the king of the south, and the things that happen, how he goes and he plants his palace there in Jerusalem. Notice Daniel chapter 12, verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, the abomination of desolation. Wait a minute. You've got the abomination of desolation being spoken about here too. So Jesus Christ refers to the abomination of desolation at the time of the end. Here we have the time of the end in Daniel chapter 12, and we also have the abomination of desolation being spoken about. So we have the abomination of desolation somehow or other involved with the events that go and take place at the time of the end. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen, but the great false church is going to be in Jerusalem. What's going to happen in Jerusalem? It's going to be surrounded by armies. And then we have the man of sin being set up, and the church flees into a place of protection. There's all kinds of ways that this could come out. We're not sure. I'm just giving you the basics. I'm giving you something to think about. Point number 4. Don't be caught off guard. Am I giving you this sermon so that you can know what's going on in history and politics, and so that you can know about, when the time of the end comes, what's going to happen? Yes. But is that the real reason I'm giving you this? No. The reason I'm giving you this is so that you can be ready. So you can be awake and prepared. I'll over-exaggerate. Go to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25. We got in Matthew 24 the time of the end, right? All the events that occur. Tribulation, heavenly signs. What's going to happen, one stone upon another. All these world events are going to take place in Matthew 24. What do we have in Matthew 25, the next chapter? And there's really no chapter breaks. What do we have? We got the 10 virgins. 5 were awake and 5 were asleep. No, it doesn't say that. It says that they were all asleep. All of them. Notice Matthew 25, verse 1. The kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. The bridegroom, don't make me, tell you everything. The bridegroom is Christ. You should already know that. Now the 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, and the wise took oil in the vessels with the lamp. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. Everybody, brethren, at the time of the end, if you're not careful, is going to be asleep. The 10 virgins, the wise virgins were asleep too. And then at midnight a cry was heard, and the story, they went out to buy oil, and they all woke up, my oil's, do you have the Holy Spirit in you? Do you have the Holy Spirit in you? Or are you going to be trying to buy it at the last minute? All these sermons I heard, and all these messages I heard, and all these things that told me I needed to change, I think now, as World War III is beginning, I'm going to change. It's not going to happen, brother. You're going to be out in the cold. Let me in. And Christ is going to say, who are you? I talked to you all of these years. What have you done? What have I done? There's a message there, brother, a warning for us that we need to be awake. Mark chapter 13. The whole gospel message to the church at the time of the end is to be awake. To be awake. But you don't understand, I have these problems with my car. My car is it's missing. And I think there's a problem with all the spark plugs. And I'm really concerned about that instead of my prayer life. Or I have this thing at work, and I got to do this thing at work, so I don't have time to study and pray and fast. Mark chapter, my job as your minister is to provoke you and stir you up to good works. Myself also, brethren, I'm just like you. Mark chapter 13. Mark chapter 13, verse 32. But of that hour, of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, not only the Son, nor the Son. Does Jesus Christ know when he's coming back? It says here at this point in time that he didn't. The only one that knows is the Father. Let me know when I need to go, Father. Tell me when I need to return. Because you're the one that knows. Verse 33. Take heed. Give you some advice, brethren. Take heed. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. For you do not know when the time is. It is like a man going to a far country who left his house and gave authority to his servants. You and I, brethren, have been given authority. We are the servants of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has left us in charge. Are you a profitable or am I a profitable or an unprofitable servant? He's left us in charge. And gave authority to his servants and to each his work, and commanded the doorkeeper to watch. Verse 35, watch therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, in the evening, at midnight, or the crowing of the rooster, or in the morning. He's going to come suddenly, and he finds you, the 10 virgins, sleeping. It's so easy, brother, nowadays to fall asleep. I'm not talking about literally. I'm talking about spiritually. There's so much that we have to do. So much that vies for our attention. So much that we think we need to accomplish. Verse 36, lest coming suddenly you find you sleeping. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch. This sermon I'm giving you is part of the watch part. You're watching the events of the world that are unfolding before you. It ought to sober you, brother. First thing I thought of when I found out that Russia was invading Ukraine, I said, what is Europe going to do? Because I know about the prophecies about the coming United States of Europe. What is Europe going to do? I mean, it's being set up, brother. It's being set up. Luke 21. Matthew, Mark, Luke 21, verse 34. Luke 21, verse 34. But take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life, and the day come on you unexpectedly. What's the day we're talking about? The day of the Lord. For it will come on a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole. Europe has united. There's going to be a war. The United States has been eliminated. They're no longer in the picture. And now we have this great war going on, and the great false church has come to power. Wow! That's what's going to happen to those in the world. If it comes to pass, brethren, if Europe unites, should it surprise you? No, it should not surprise us. We should expect it. Because we have been told for the last almost 100 years, the Church of God has been preaching about the coming United States of Europe. How many more signs do you and I need? Verse 35. For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape. You're not praying that I can escape. You're praying so that because you pray so much, God's going to let you escape. Don't pray that your skin is saved. Pray about what things you're supposed to pray about, so that when it comes time, God will protect you from the things that are coming to pass. Watch therefore, verse 36, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass and stand before the Son of Man. So, brethren, we're being warned. The reason that Revelation was written, and the reason that Daniel was written, and the reason that these prophecies were given were so that when they come to pass, we would take heart. Can you imagine if God had not told us anything? And you see, what would you think if God had not told us anything, and then you see these things happening? You go like, wow, what's going on? But the things are happening just like God has said. What should that mean to you? God knows what he's doing, and everything's going according to his plan. Final scripture, or second to the last, 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians. And we're going to read in 1 Thessalonians, verse 5. Chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1. Brethren, I shouldn't even have to be talking to you about this. Paul shouldn't have to even be writing to you about this. It should be obvious. Look at what it says. But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you. I shouldn't even have to write to tell you about these things. Should I have to preach a sermon about prophecy to get you and me ready? No. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. The day of the Lord is coming like thief in the night. You ever been involved when there's a robbery at night? Happens all of a sudden. What would have happened if you'd have known the thief was coming? You'd have prepared. You'd have locked your doors extra special. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. We have no excuse, brethren, if we're surprised by these events. God's going to say, I've been talking to you about this for the last 100 years. Arnold, haven't you been listening? Verse 5. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of the darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. So the main thing I want to leave you with today, brethren, is that we need to be sober and we need to be watching. The Church of God has for many years been predicting that there is a new superpower rising. I remember when I was a teenager, before I was in the church, reading the Church of God literature that foretold these things. That was about 55 years ago. I read article after article that said Europe was going to rise. They started preaching about this in the 1930s. So we're in 2022. Another 8 years, it'll be almost 100 years. And the precursors to the church that went before our present era were preaching about this also. So they've probably been preaching about this for hundreds of years. The pages of the Bible have predicted this union of nations that will rise in Europe. It will be unified by a common religion led by Germany and will dominate the world scene at the time of the end. Satan is the power behind all of this. Satan is the one that is extremely angry since he has a short time. Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. Satan is the one behind all this. He is extremely angry, brethren. Revelation chapter 12, verse 12. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that it has a short time. Satan doesn't have very much time, brethren. Brethren, I don't know how much time we have left. I don't. I really don't. Once again, don't say Mendez said that in 2 months, this is going to happen. I don't know. Things could move along very rapidly, or things may go back to simmering and marinating. Until sometime in the future, the snare will be sprung. I do know that eventually Jesus Christ is going to bring a kingdom. The heavenly stone that we read about in Daniel chapter 2. And he will destroy all the worldly kingdoms and the worldly nations. But I know that before this happens, the United States of Europe must rise up. The 10 toes, the 10 horns, the events in Europe, the events in Russia, the events in the Ukraine, and future events are forerunners of this coming political system. What the Apostle Paul said and what the Gospel writers said is very applicable today. We must be sober and be watchful, because these things are certainly going to come to pass.